Welcome to this explainer. You know, every single meal we eat connects back to one really fundamental puzzle, the land itself and the folks actually out there farming it. Today, we are going to break down the core elements of India's economy. We'll be looking at how land is utilized as a production resource, the absolute sheer scale of the agricultural output it generates, and the modern everyday challenges facing the people working that land. Let's jump in. Let's start by looking at a crucial question that really defines India's modern agricultural challenge. How exactly does a rapidly growing economy, we're talking increasing population, booming industries, how does it survive and feed itself on a strictly fixed amount of geographical space? It's literally a giant puzzle of resource management. So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the fixed land problem, then move into India's agricultural landscape, break down the major crops feeding India, dive into the history of the Green Revolution, and finally wrap up with modern agricultural challenges. All right, Section 1, the fixed land problem, competing for a finite resource. What's really fascinating here is the fierce tug of war for physical space. Land for non-agricultural uses is just shooting up, expanding urban settlements, roads, industries, the whole shebang. But if you look closely, the net area sown, which is the actual land where crops are harvested, has also increased slightly. How is that even possible if growing cities are eating up more room? Well, agriculture is essentially pushing outward into former wastelands, so the amount of barren and wasteland is shrinking to accommodate both our sprawling cities and our massive need for food. Now, we absolutely cannot forget about common property resources, or CPRs. Not all land has a private property sign on it. CPRs are spaces like community forests, pasture lands, or village water bodies that are meant strictly for community use. This is a big deal because many landless and marginal farmers heavily rely on these spaces to graze their livestock. Plus, CPRs are totally critical for women in rural areas who spend long, hard hours gathering essential fuel and fodder from these shared lands. Moving right along to Section 2, India's agricultural landscape, maximizing the earth. Let's see how India manages to pull such incredible output from this totally finite space. Since India can't just magically create new land out of thin air, the absolute key here is something called cropping intensity. Basically, if you can't expand the physical borders of your farm, you have to farm that exact same plot more times a year. It's a brilliant land-saving strategy that raises the total output per unit of land. And actually, there's an amazing secondary benefit to this. Growing multiple crops a year significantly boosts the demand for rural labor. So for a country that is short on land but has abundant labor, high cropping intensity is a real game changer for reducing rural unemployment. Of course, this intensive farming is totally dictated by the rhythm of the seasons. Take the Kharif season, for example. It's driven by the southwest monsoon, making it perfect for tropical crops like rice and cotton. Contrast that sharply with the Rabi season, which kicks off with the onsets of winter and is ideal for temperate or subtropical crops like wheat and gram. Oh, and there's also a quick summer season sandwiched in between, called Zaid, which is perfect for vegetables and watermelons, assuming you've got the irrigation for it. Okay, Section 3, major crops feeding India an economic powerhouse. Let's zoom in on the actual harvest that feeds over 1 billion people. To wrap our heads around this massive variety, let's break down the major players. Food grains alone take up about 2/3 of the total cropped area in the country. Cereals like rice and wheat absolutely dominate the landscape. But then you have pulses like gram and tur. These are super important legume crops that actually boost natural soil fertility by fixing nitrogen, all while providing a massive source of protein. Moving down the list, we've got crucial oilseeds grown in drylands, and vital fiber crops like cotton and jute that feed huge domestic and international markets. To really put that output into perspective, check out this global ranking. Second, India is massive on the world stage. It holds the global #2 spot for producing rice and cotton, just behind China. It's also the second largest producer of sugarcane, right behind Brazil, and ranks second globally among tea exporting countries. That is just an astonishing volume of production, isn't it? Let's pivot to Section 4, the Green Revolution, transforming the yield. How did India actually pull off this phenomenal scale? Wow, this timeline really captures the arc of India's agricultural journey. Before the 1950s, farming was mostly subsistence level, and sadly the country suffered from severe droughts and tragic famines. The massive turning point hit right in the mid-1960s with the introduction of packaged technology, which sparked explosive growth. By the 1980s, the focus shifted to agroclimatic planning to help out the rain-fed areas, eventually leading to the policy of liberalization in the 1990s, integrating this giant system into the global free market. The huge catalyst in the 1960s was, without a doubt, the triumph of the Green Revolution. By bringing in high-yielding varieties of seeds, specifically wheat from Mexico and rice from the Philippines, and pairing them with chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and guaranteed irrigation, India was able to radically and almost instantly increase food grain production. This specific move ended the era of relying on imported food and made the country entirely self-reliant in food grains. But, as you might guess, this phenomenal success came at a really steep price. Let's look at Section 5, Modern Agricultural Challenges, the Cost of Growth. Despite all those impressive high-tech advancements, there is a glaring vulnerability staring us in the face. Look at this. A massive 67% of India's cultivated land is entirely rain-fed. That means 2/3 of the nation's crops are completely at the mercy of erratic and unreliable monsoons. Even areas that usually get high rainfall can face sudden, crazy fluctuations, leaving the whole sector incredibly vulnerable to the twin menaces of unpredictable droughts and flash floods. Compounding those weather risks is a whole cascade of systemic challenges. First off, despite the Green Revolution, overall per hectare yields for crops like rice and wheat are still lower than in countries like the US or Japan. Second, modern farming is expensive. Small farmers frequently have to take out loans, which leads to crushing financial debt when a crop fails. Add in historical issues like unequal land distribution, because early land reforms lacked the political muscle to be fully implemented, and the fact that population pressure is constantly shrinking and fragmenting family farms into these tiny, uneconomic plots. The result? Massive seasonal underemployment, where farmers in unirrigated areas might literally be out of work for 4 to 8 months out of the year. And perhaps the most sobering challenge of all is the environmental toll. The tragic irony of the Green Revolution is pretty perfectly captured right here. The exact same aggressive irrigation and heavy chemical use that was meant to save the nation from famine has ultimately led to severe land degradation. Constant multiple cropping strips away natural fertilization processes, while faulty irrigation causes soil salinization and waterlogging. It's a really stark reminder that pushing for intense agricultural output can sometimes severely cost us the future health of the soil itself. Which brings us to the end of our explainer. I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to chew on. As the soil depletes from toxic chemicals and over-farming, and as the population continues to rapidly grow on this completely fixed amount of land, how is the next generation going to evolve land-saving technologies? How can India write the next chapter of its agricultural story to actually repair the land while still feeding its people? Thanks so much for exploring this fascinating topic with me today.